Hi, welcome to Aorath with Robin Richardson. You know, I will be getting around to explaining what exactly Aorath is, but not yet. Not yet. Stay tuned. So last week we talked about spiritual bypassing, and this week we're going to go to the next phase, which is what happens inevitably after you've spiritual bypassed for too long, which is the shadow work and confrontation with the shadow and integration. And what exactly is the shadow? So just to recap, spiritual bypassing, and again, we're not saying that it's wrong, we're just identifying what it is, because I did it for 3 years, and they were the best 3 years of my life. So again, the basic recap of spiritual bypassing is you learn, and we all learn this at a certain point, because a lot of the big teachers out there are teaching this, we learn that reality is reflective. So we learn that how we feel determines what we experience, not the other way around. And so those people who are less aware are doing it the other way around. In a sense, they're reacting to their environment. So it's like the mirror is frowning, so they get really sad and they frown, and then the mirror keeps frowning, and then they're caught in a cycle of non-aware self-reflection where everyone's mean and they don't realize that they are the cause, in a sense, because they are the one reflecting back that reality. And I don't mean to oversimplify this. I'm still stuck in reflections that I don't like. I have huge persecution reflections that I cannot shake. I'm trying. But I recognize that they're my reflection. I recognize they're my responsibility. But anyways, you'll learn as you listen to me talk that these episodes are not, your typical video on YouTube is going to be a concise breakdown of this thing. It's like, no, shadow is the overall theme, but I'm mostly just talking. And if you enjoy the sound of my voice and you enjoy the way my mind moves, you'll get into this. I mean, a lot of people who follow Lighten Up Your Eternal just that was what they were here for, my rambling. So let me ramble. All right, back to it. So anyways, those so a lot of people are reacting to their environment and creating feedback loops. So they're stuck, right? It's like they keep punching the mirror and the mirror keeps punching them back. Like picture a cat who doesn't understand their reflection and they keep attacking this thing and it keeps attacking them and they're just stuck. The aware person realizes that they can't fix the frown on the mirror and Bashar has said this, I have to credit him. I didn't come up with this mirror analogy of fixing the frown. I can't take credit where it's not due. But so the unaware person sees the frown and says, "Stop frowning," to the reflection, which doesn't work. The aware person sees the frown and says, "Oh, I will smile. And when I smile, the mirror will smile back." So when someone figures this out and they start to see, and for me this was in part due to spiritual teachings that as soon as I heard them, I was able to look at my life and see that everything fit this pattern, that it was true. Through experience, I saw that this was true, at least as far as my experience, my existence went. There was never an incident that wasn't a reflection. I could see that. And a near-death experience also helped me see this. It helped me see a lot of things that I illuminate in the podcast. And I will be doing a whole episode on the near-death experience, so stay tuned. So the aware person smiles and the mirror smiles back. So how this leads to spiritual bypassing is you go, oh my God, if I'm happy, the whole world will be good. And if I feel abundant and I feel grateful and I feel beautiful, I will be abundant and filled with gifts to be grateful for and beauty. The world will reflect that back to me. So that's what I did, and I needed it. I do not shame myself for doing it. I was manic. I think when I say that word, you'll picture something different than what I was. I was in bliss for 3 years, and the world smiled back like you would not believe. I cannot tell you the money that flowed to me, the beauty that flowed to me, the peace, the tranquility, the joy, the music. It was absolutely exquisite. But And I don't know, and I talked about this, even the guidance that I came into contact with was so eager for me to reach this state. And I'm cautious about that now, because it wasn't a balanced approach. So these beings, including angels, who said, we want you to vibrate so high, we want you to be so happy that you come to heaven and you just stay here. I almost start to feel like those were entities that fed on that high vibration. And a lot of people, and again, so that trap of thinking, a lot of early people in their spirit, if you're kind of having your spiritual awakening and you get into a spiritual community, like people are into plant medicine or drum circles or whatever, a lot of them will show you this graph, this spiral that goes up, and it's like, anger is down here on the spiral and it's only this many hertz, and you want to go up to joy, gratitude, and then enlightenment is at the top of the spiral. So you got to get so happy that you're enlightened, and that's the kind of love and light trap. And it's so addictive because it does work in making life beautiful, but it doesn't work in terms of the shadow. So it's unintegrated. You can stay in heaven for a very long time vibrating high, but it won't. But you're not self-actualized. You're not whole because you're running away from the shadow. So what is the shadow? So Carl Jung coined this phrase, but we're going to talk about it in relation to a lot of things. The best way I can describe it is, and I'll talk about how Carl Jung describes it, and you'll see how spiritual bypassing and spirituality accentuates this. But the shadow, it forms, it's an aspect of any human being, any human psyche. And it begins to form as you begin to integrate into society, as you are raised as a child. So everything that you are taught to turn away from or deny it's what becomes the shadow. So if your parents say, stop being such a wimp, your wimpiness goes into the shadow. If they say, stop being so aggressive, your aggression, if you listen to them, goes into the shadow. So everything that you have to repress in order to behave, everything that you're unaware of, your sexual tendencies, your violence, and you've got to think, so many people do so much in order to fit in, especially today. I've never seen a culture that requires such a simulation in order to belong, quote unquote. And almost every social circle has its ideologies. And if you don't subscribe to the same ideologies, you're cast out. This creates massive shadows because the honest to God truth of humans is we're very varied and we don't all agree. So in order to seem to agree, we take the part that doesn't fit and we cast it out. I no longer acknowledge, and here's a really good example of this is, and this is a huge one in my mind, the difference between performing inclusivity and versus actually getting there. Because, for instance, social, economic, racial, and gendered biases are the brain, they're inevitable. Like the brain has patterning recognition and will recognize certain patterns and then understand things from those viewpoints. So this idea that we've suddenly overcome all of our biases and we're perfect and we present ourselves as perfect to our peers, is that creates a shadow where those biases that are still there in our brains exist. And so when I talk about community, for instance, and these walkable villages that I'll be talking about, it's very important for me that we don't all pretend to be right, that we don't all pretend to be good, that we create a space where it's safe to say, God, you know what, but I still have this Pavlovian response to seeing this thing. And instead of getting cast out, you're embraced in a way that increases the understanding of these things. So this is how a shadow gets integrated versus outcast. So if you're not allowed to say, okay, let's talk about gender because I'm a woman and it's a safe place to talk about that. So let's say a man feels like in this culture he's supposed to really honor women, but he still doesn't. He kind of hated his mother. He sees women as weak. He doesn't really respect them, but he's saying all the right things and he's doing all the right things to fit in and to get ahead in the world. So the part of him that still disrespects women is his shadow. He is not expressing it. He's not integrating it. And therefore no one can address it because everyone wants him to behave. No one wants him to be honest. So the shadow begins to form its, and this is why they call it a shadow. You can picture it. The shadow comes off the person. The light casts it away, but it's still there and it becomes this autonomous being that moves with the person. So that man's shadow is going to eventually hurt a woman or hurt himself or something like that. It can become this monster of its own because you're not working with it. If he was to acknowledge these things, he could eventually work through them, integrate them, and understand them and transmute them. So that's the Jungian view of the shadow. And collectives have shadows too. So if the collective says we must, gender equality, absolutely, we all agree with that. Well, the collective still has gender issues. Both, everyone does. We all have a lot of issues. So what happens to those issues? Well, in the collective, they become scapegoats. So someone will volunteer or someone will be cast out as the scapegoat. This is why cancel culture exists, because the collective doesn't want to collectively deal with the fact that we've still got these unresolved issues around this stuff, and it's complicated and it's nuanced and it's messy. Instead, they say, that man is the problem. And if we get rid of him, if we burn him at the stake, we'll all be safe again. And we can all move forward in the way that we've agreed is perfect. So the more, and this is where it ties into spiritual bypassing, the more we strive for perfection and light and love and all of this, utopian idealism, the bigger the shadow we cast. We're not letting ourselves be messy. I'm reading this book on community, and I'll talk about this by Scott Peck, called A Different Drum. And it's all about this in community. The idea is you'd have to have a really good reason not to let someone into the community, like they're beating everyone up. Otherwise, it's for everybody. And that means you all hold different viewpoints. And some of you are annoying, and some of you are selfish, and some of you are a mess. And the idea is you're going to learn to coexist, not because you're all the same, not because you all agree, not because you're all good. Because that's not community. That's assimilation and negation of the truth. Because we're not all the same. So again, that's how the collective breeds a shadow. And the personal will build a shadow, especially when they're... Well, it's so interesting on the spiritual path, because the first stage of awakening is you start to cast off, like for me, in 2020, when I had my first awakening, I stepped out of, I integrated the shadow that I had gotten from my community. Meaning, I stopped pretending to think a certain way. I stopped speaking a certain way, and I started being honest, for better or for worse, and I was very quickly outcasted, of course, because you're not supposed to be honest. So that was, I integrated that shadow, and I allowed myself to just be honest with myself. And a lot of it, was acknowledging, oh my God, I'm a little shit. I'm no good. I'm annoying. I'm this, I'm that. It's integrating the shadow is kind of requires there's a humiliation process to it. So allowing yourself to be humiliated and go, wow, okay, I was a problem. I was the problem in this, that, and the other way. And I acknowledge that. And I heal that, I change my behaviors, and I move on. That's a really healthy way to integrate shadows. But then I inherited a whole new cast of shadows when I embraced the spiritual path. And they hit hard. So I'll talk about what they were and how they hit, and Jung says this, a shadow can become a psychosis if left unattended, which means So this is, and again, I'm just trying, let me sort of use my story to help you understand how the shadow, when it manifests, because it eventually manifests. If you've taken Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12 Steps program, I did that for a while. And they say if you just stop drinking without doing the work, there's a whole bunch of work you do in Alcoholics Anonymous that's actually parallels the spiritual awakening. If you don't do the work, meaning if you don't go in there and integrate your shadow and look at your shadow, they say your addiction, you may not be engaging in it, but it's in the basement doing push-ups. It's in the basement doing push-ups. The shadow is not a passive entity. So the parts of yourself that you're ignoring are getting stronger in your ignorance. So if they're in the room with you, you can keep an eye on them. If they're in the basement, they're getting stronger and stronger, and they're hatching a plan because they want to exist. So you've got to, you see how real this is. Your sexual perversions or your arrogance or your prejudice wants to be expressing itself, right? Every part of you wants to be expressing itself. And if it's not embodied with you, and if it's not growing alongside you, it's becoming a distortion outside of you. And that's why the psychosis seems so autonomous. So, because it's become an autonomous entity that is now coming to, it says, if you won't integrate me, I will possess you. That's what happened to me with my unattended shadow. It tried to gain control of my entire body as a totally foreign entity. Jung says this, and so there's the shadow, there's the anima animus, and there's the trickster archetype. These guys are all in the shadow category. And I'll talk about Jung later, get into all that later. But the trickster archetype, he says, the trickster will destroy your life if that's what it takes to end your hubris. These are beings that are here to correct you. And depending on how far off you are, that might end in your insanity or death. So the shadow is no, it's not to be taken lightly. It's not to be taken lightly. And I think that this world is set up violently against integration and self-actualization. It's created to fracture. So the way we are encouraged to behave properly destroys us. It destroys us. It destroys truth. It really does. So this is why so many on the spiritual path will isolate. But actually, before I tell my big shadow story, when it takes its toll. So again, the first shadow story, me leaving the culture that I was in, which was the Canadian literary world, it took its toll, right? As soon as I became honest and unhinged, I was excommunicated. I lost all my money because everything I had built on a faulty foundation. So being willing to face the shadow can mean being willing to give up everything. And that's the light version. What happened after my 3 years in heaven is much worse, but let me digress first. And you might have already been thinking of this as I'm talking, but in every religious, philosophical, I don't be hyperbolic, not everyone, but many key religious texts will point to the same phenomenon, but a different lens. So it's interesting. A lot of people like to say, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Gnostic, I'm a Christian. I don't, they're all of these approaches, they come from one individual who has seen through the veil, like I have, and they've seen it from their own lens, and they're bringing it to you from their own lens. So which one you choose usually depends on how aligned you are with that given person or what culture you're raised in. But the way I see it is I just acknowledge that we've all seen the same thing using a different language and a different visual language. So the shadow manifests across ideologies. In Gnosticism, as I've touched on, whoever perceived reality through this Gnostic lens, used character-based narrative. That's the same as the Christian. So in the Christian, you've got God and the devil splits from God and falls. And you've got that's the shadow, right? It's an unintegrated negative aspect that falls and then causes trouble as an autonomous being. The Gnostic, it's the demiurge. Sophia creates from pure light, and in that is born the darkness and the material and the parasitic and the masculine. So everything that Sophia is trying to deny becomes an autonomous entity and causes a great deal of pain and suffering. In Jewish mysticism, which is much less character-driven and much more numerical and logical, you've got the tree of life and then you've got the Qliphoth. So when the tree of life is created and from pure light and wisdom, anything that didn't fit in with that fell into the darkness, into the underground, the upside down world, like Stranger Things. And it carried with it some sparks of light into the darkness, and everything is inverted and evil. And so where light gives, the darkness takes. And the Qliphoth, my descent into the shadow, I think, lines up very well with the idea of the Qliphoth. It's actually part of Jewish mysticism to go into the Qliphoth to retrieve the fragments of light that are in the shadow, your shadow integration. So you see all of these people are seeing the same phenomenon, but they've just got a different visual language or narrative language for expressing it. So they're all having a direct religious experience, direct spiritual experience. But the shadow is consistent. It's a fact. It's a fact. And the more you try to be good, the bigger your shadow. And it will manifest. And I will tell you, you might hope it manifests as psychosis or your own downfall, because that's better than if it manifests as a scapegoat. The most righteous people in the world will point the finger at someone else and burn them alive. And those people whose shadow manifests as a scapegoat, they're facing real damnation. They're facing real, because when they wake up from the dream that is life, they will feel very bad, very, very bad for projecting their shadow on someone else and taking them out. And they'll have to pay for that. So if the shadow takes you out, good, good, good. Trust me. And this is one thing for those on their enlightenment trial. The closer you are to enlightenment, the more your program actually eats you up. It doesn't eat you up. How do I say? Your karma loops become very quick, and the more beat up you get, the more almost better you're doing, because it means the system is beginning to self-correct to make sure that you can reach the enlightenment, to make sure that you can clear the karma. The karma hits you really fast. People who seem to have it really good and they get away with murder, they're actually not doing so well in the larger spiritual game. It's funny, some people think they're playing the game of life so well, and they're actually losing profoundly, because they're collecting karma points. And you don't want to collect karma points. You want to get rid of karma points. Trust me. Negative ones anyways. So it's good if it hits you. Okay? It's good if it hits you. It's good if you're getting beaten up, so long as you transmute it and work it in your favor. So for me, how did my descent to the Qliphoth begin? How did my shadow manifest? Well, there were a few key things that I wasn't confronting, that I wasn't aware of. And this kind of is born. A lot of my shadow, this new shadow, was born from the spiritual bypassing, because in my bliss, I so felt like the chosen one. We all do when we're manic. Because the whole world, every sign was a love letter to me. Everything I saw was speaking directly to me. And it was words of affirmation and beauty and love. And I was being tenderly embraced by the universe in every waking moment. It was like living in honey, like the land of milk and honey, really. And I was so enjoying being in my own world that I didn't really realize how I was coming off necessarily. I still don't regret it, but as a result, I had become very soft, very arrogant. Like I believed I knew it all. I was the smartest, most beautiful, most talented person in the world, according to my own, the world that was reflecting that to me. Everyone was treating me like a celebrity. I felt so great. So there was arrogance. There was an inability to deal with people because I isolated for 3 years. I had no idea how to talk to people anymore or to communicate. And I was naive. I had become so soft. And again, that materialism where I think a part of me still thought, and it wasn't strong, but it was just a part of me that still thought maybe it's good to go to, like, maybe I want to be part of the elite's world. Saying that now makes me cringe. And I didn't know so much at the time that I wanted that, but when they set the trap to call me, like that's where my cliff off took place. Let's say it that way. The big boss of my psyche was basically comprised of the most powerful people in the world, because a part of me wanted to be there. And I actually had seen flashes of myself in ancient Egypt being a little farm girl who had psychedelic visions 24/7. And I worked my way up through Egypt to the palace, where I was then eaten alive. I thought, the pharaoh and everyone will want me because I know all about Egypt in a way that they don't, and they'll think I'm valuable, but they really just literally sucked on my energy until I died. I was so naive, right? But that's a karmic cycle that I've had. So that was a big aspect of my shadow, and in my state of spiritual bypassing, my naivete, I never thought it was possible. So I didn't look far enough into this past life to see the part where they eat me alive, right? I just thought, I'll get into the palace and then I'll have luxury. And I like luxury because I'm so hypersensitive. It's not, for me, it's not materialism. Like, I don't want to show off. I certainly don't want to show off. But I want to be really comfortable. Like, I like nice things because I really feel textures. I really hear sounds. So I was tempted, and that arrogance, right? And I think I have something really valuable to offer the world. So my big boss, my big shadow came in the form of, it was made up of characters from the top of the world. People in the entertainment industry, people in tech, people in politics, at the very top. And it came in the form of them saying, we want you. So that was that was the initiatory door. And that for me is a many lifetime karma of thinking that the way that I'm going to gift the world and the way that the world is going to gift me is through me being initiated into the elite society. And that's how I'm going to change the world. And I had been reading stories leading up to this. This is shadow work, not just of this lifetime, but this for me was shadow work that spanned many lifetimes. In the months leading up to this phenomenon, I read so many stories. I was reading Madame de Pompadour and the last empress of China. I was reading all about these women who came up from common society and married the king, and then were used up by the king. And I just kept ignoring the used up part and thinking, oh, how grand. And it's very embarrassing to admit now. I mean, I was raised on the paper bag princess, okay? Like, I was raised by a single mother who was a judge, for God's sake. I mean, it's not in this lifetime that I was programmed for that. I have Robin has no programming for marry the king, but it's an intergenerational, it's an interlifetime. It's a strong thread. And I'll talk about that with Aorath, how these threads form. We call them currents, these currents. that get created within your geometry, these stories. And so I had the peasant girl marries the king, and it's Cinderella. I mean, it permeates our culture. My culture. My culture is Cinderella. So, but this is why when I say it's embarrassing, you would never know that about me because it's my shadow. I don't advertise it. I don't think about it. Robin is an independent person. I bought my own house, for God's sake, with my own money. I don't depend on men. My dad left when I was 11, didn't even buy me a cup of coffee. Okay? But that's why it's the shadow. So my big bad shadow came for me in the form of that fantasy that I had not even acknowledged that I had. And so how it manifested was a psychosis. I think I'm doing it a disservice. I think these were very real phenomenon with these people at the top of the world trying to recruit, seduce me telepathically. So they had entered in my meditation and began to speak to me and wanted me to follow their instructions and join them. So I resisted. At first I was trying to go with them, and then my body just wouldn't. My body resisted, and then my mind finally followed suit and said no. And then I went into war with them for 9 months of a completely debilitating psychosis, and their whole thing was, if you won't join us, we'll possess you, and if you won't be possessed, we'll kill you. So it was absolutely brutal, and it was my descent into the cliff off. And I'll talk about that more as we go, those stories. But here's how I integrated the shadow through this. First, it's that it's in the first month where I finally rejected the idea. That was the first slaying of the first dragon, was to overcome the part of me. So ignoring it, just saying, no, I don't want that. And I'm telling you, I see people all the time when I tell them about this seduction story. Oh, I wouldn't fall for that. Oh no, I can't be seduced by anything. I don't care about powerful men. I don't blah, blah, blah. But 100%, and this is the thing, now that I've seen the devil, now that I've met the demiurge or the antichrist or whatever, the evil man, he laughs so much because there's not one person that he hasn't tempted that hasn't fallen for it, at least for a while. He knows what you want. So you can deny it all you want. Oh, I'm not easily seduced. Oh, trust me. And that's the thing, it's that arrogance. Oh, everybody wants to tell me I wouldn't fall for it. Well, that arrogance alone, that arrogance is a part of the shadow. That the arrogance, well, that's the next part. So the first part of the shadow that I had to overcome was that desire. And not by repressing it, not by telling people it wasn't there and believing it, but by facing it, acknowledging it, being humiliated by it, and then finally letting it go. I do not want to go with the kings. The kings are assholes. I get it. They don't love me. They want to use me. They're not nice guys. No kings. That's why my tattoo says nature knows no kings. So I slayed that. I slayed that dragon. I integrated that shadow, first by acknowledging it, and then by deciding that it was actually stupid. But then the next one came, because I was humiliated by this king. And I lashed out. And I thought I could go to war with him. I could humiliate him. And that was arrogant of me. And so that arrogance caused me a lot of suffering because it only angered him, and he lashed out. And I was beaten up. I have permanent scars, permanent physical scars from war with this king. And when I looked, it was through going through war with this being, this shadow entity, that I had to refine myself. So I realized that strategically, arrogance, thinking, oh, I'm so powerful and I'm light and you're stupid and you're darkness, that made things worse. So I started to understand why that made things worse and why humility was actually a better war strategy than arrogance. And in that sense, that's how I started to slay the dragon of my own arrogance, to see it through his eyes, to be embarrassed by it. Humiliation, and I'm going to make probably a whole episode on it. Humiliation is one of my most powerful tools. I have noticed that if you're humiliated, it means you are seeing and acknowledging the thing you don't like about yourself. That is the first most important step in the alchemy of shadow integration. If you're humiliated, congratulations, you're breaking a curse. So, because if you're not humiliated, you're not fully seeing how stupid you are. And until you fully see how stupid you are, you can't get smarter. So, when I started to understand this demon as my teacher, not intentionally, I'm not going to give him the credit of that, but I started to see him as my teacher, is that everything that made things worse was something that I needed to look at. So my chasing his dangling carrot was a weakness I had to overcome. My arrogance was a weakness I had to overcome. My naivete, I believed him over and over again. I'll also say, in this process, in this psychosis, and I've had this before, you're brought in, so it's like the cliff off, you're brought into the underworld, into the upside down world, and you're battling with these demons. So I was in 24/7, 24 hours a day, this man was in my head, this king. And I was always in a different simulation, fighting a different war. I never left my apartment, barely. Just a stinking, crazy woman going through the cliff off, going through hell. But, that made me lose my previous train of thought. He was my teacher. Oh gosh, I don't know. Oh yeah. So the whole time I was in the cliff off, the whole time I was in the underworld, my shadow was aggravated. So I was in an insane state, a sleepless state, a foodless state. So that basically, and this is real shadow work, okay? I wouldn't be that naive normally. Like I had, before I could go chasing this dangling carrot, he came and hypnotized me for weeks. I lost consciousness for weeks in my apartment because he was scrambling my brain. The idea is the parts of me that were that arrogant, the parts of me that were that naive, the parts of me that still wanted to be saved by a king, they were deep, deep, deep down. Like I had really managed them, and they were not going to show themselves on a well-fed, well-slept Robin. So I needed to be brought down until I was practically non-functioning in order for my shadow to show itself. This is so important because I think so many people go through the psychosis and they don't know what's going on. You've got to understand the mechanics of it. I was brought to my knees. I was brought to my most base state so that we could see. It's like surgery. Like, Robin, we're going to starve you. We're going to deprive you of sleep. We're going to confuse you. We're going to put you at war for months so that we can see right into the molecular structures where you're still stupid. Where are you still stupid? It really was surgery. It was like, if you've ever done ayahuasca, it was like the ayahuasca trip that never ends. It was a 9-month ayahuasca trip. It was energetic surgery. So again, if you understand that this is what's happening when you're in psychosis, you're going to feel a lot less like a victim and a lot more like you're going through an important alchemical process. And I'm one of the only people I know who's successfully just come out of it because I embraced that. I understood it as such, as an alchemical process, and worked with it as such. And it was like the world's greatest video game. And I just became a really good gamer of my own psyche until I was able to transcend it. I wouldn't say transcend it. I would say actually I fed myself right through the bottom of it and then beat the game by learning everything I had to, all the buttons to press. And everything I had to learn was about refining, fine-tuning, and integrating myself. Susceptibility to flattery. So my enemies would use flattery or love. We love you. And that would prey on my naivete. I'm naive enough to believe that. I want to believe that people are all loving and And that's not true. And until I acknowledge that that's not true, until I stop looking for the inner light and the demon eating me alive, I'm still stupid. I can really use that binary. Is Robin smart or stupid? So it's like in every instance in this war, I had to go, is this smart or stupid? And then I had to stop being stupid. And then as soon as I stopped being stupid, I would win that battle. Because my shadow was preying on my stupidity. So a character would come along and praise me, and I would fall for it, and then they would attack me. I had to stop falling for the praise and admit that these people just hate me. But nobody can hate me. I'm so great. No, people hate you. That's okay. You're not that great. That's okay. You know? At the very end, I had to completely surrender my entire ego, my entire identity, any clinging I had to being a good person or a beautiful person or having a bright future. I let it all go. It was the end of all clinging, the end of all desire. And I just surrendered. And in surrendering, I was free. I fully surrendered. You know, it's funny. When the whole thing started, I remember being like, I know that this isn't a good thing, what's happening. But I know I have to do it. But I remember, no, here's the thing. I remember when they first came, I was like, I know that the goal of these beings is to bring me to my knees. And then it'll be over. I thought of the scene from The Secretary, where she wants to prove herself to him. So she's like she sits at the table. The Secretary, if you haven't seen it, is Maggie Gyllenhaal and James Spader. And Maggie Gyllenhaal is a self-harming secretary for James Spader. And James Spader is a sadist. She's a masochist. So he starts playing games with her and she starts liking it. So he's kind of mean to her and he gets her to submit and she plays along. She likes it. And she wants to prove herself to him at the end. So she sits at a table to wait for him and she sits for days and days. So much she pees her pants. She's just sitting there. And at the very end, when she can barely breathe or she's totally exhausted, he comes with a smoothie to revive her and then agrees to marry her. I saw that. I saw that these beings, I saw that this would be over when I was on my knees. I saw that in the beginning. And it was really funny. I remember trying to just do it. I was like, oh, maybe it was like being in an escape room. It was like being in an escape room, and I kept trying to fast track the process. And another, Inanna's descent into hell reflects this as well. And Persephone, of course. But Inanna more so in the structure. So so I was sitting at my window thinking that they're all filming me and there's this initiation and they wanted me to dance and perform and do all this stuff at first. And I remember just trying to I sat at my window for 7 days straight without sleeping, without eating. I did go to pee. I didn't pee in my pants, but that's the only time I got up. I just sat there to prove myself and to try and fast track. So I thought if I exhaust myself now, maybe it'll be done. So I tried to get myself to my knees early and they were all scratching their heads like, what are you doing? I was trying to find the escape hatch in the hell escape room. But there was a funny meme that came up around the time that this all happened that said, that had a man in a mental hospital saying, this is the worst escape room ever. And then the nurse saying, sir, this is a mental hospital. But yeah. So I think that, God, this is very helpful for anyone going through psychosis, is to understand the structure of the shadow and what the shadow wants from you. It wants your humility, but you can't fake it. You've got to go through it. And the way to go through it is to always remember, back to the mirror analogy, that what you're being shown, you're not, and I fell into this trap so many times. I tried to fix the king. I tried to heal the king. Bitch, the king is just your reflection. The king is showing you, through his manipulation, that you're naive, that you're gullible. Stop being gullible, and the king will stop being manipulative. If you recognize you're in a hall of mirrors, you're going to get out a lot faster. Again, there's no shortcut. You still have to go through it, but you have to adjust your reflection by adjusting yourself in every instance. That's really the key. That's a lot of information. What updates do I have? I don't know. I'm working on all kinds of things. So check my website. And if you want to support the podcast, if you're really enjoying the podcast, you can subscribe on Substack for $5 a month or $50 a year. And that gives you access to more content and allows you to support if you love this. We're still building it up. This is brand new. So sad I let go of Lighten Up Your Eternal. It's just another example of the things that the cliff off will take from you if you're not savvy. So are you smart or are you dumb? Are you being stupid or are you being smart? The fastest way to get smart is to recognize how stupid you are. You can quote me on that. And that's all I'll say for this week. And until next week, stay well and comment on YouTube if you have a question.